It's not only the black workers from Tswana land or Venda land or Zulu land that come to work in South Africa. The citizens of independent African countries come to South Africa to look for work for the simple reason that their own countries can't employ them. You have more or less 90,000 Malawians working in this country. And if we were to say to Malawi tomorrow, and we've never had anything to do with Malawi whatsoever, it's a country, as you know, situated far away from us. If we were to say to them tomorrow, I'm awfully sorry, I can't accommodate your people any longer, you must take them back, their economy will be very, very seriously hurt. The same applies to Lesotho, an independent country, member of UNO. If we were to say to Lesotho, we are sorry, we can't employ their 105,000 people working in this country at the moment, you can well imagine what will happen to the economy of Lesotho. Well, the same applies to Botswana, and the same applies to Swaziland, and the same applies to any other of the African countries who come to South Africa to look for work.
Well, but Mr. Vorster, what you are saying is either a commentary on the paradise of South Africa or on the misery of the countries they flee from.
No, it's not a question of misery either, or a paradise either for this matter. It is simply that as far as the whole of Africa is concerned, it's got a backlog in development. To understand that, again, one must look at their history. But the point is, and I'm not saying it in a derogatory sense at all, but for generations to come, on account of the fact that they multiply by over 3%, as compared with ours of little over 1%. For generations to come, their difficulty will consequently be that they cannot create sufficient avenues of employment. And therefore, for generations to come, and I want to make it very clear that I'm not saying it in a derogatory sense at all, but in a practical, realistic sense, their main export will be labor, because they can't employ their own people. And it so happens that until that time, that they have developed to such an extent that they can employ their own people, they will be forced to look to South Africa and other countries to employ their people whom they cannot employ themselves.
1974, the then Prime Minister of Apartheid South Africa, John Vorster, predicted the immigration crisis that we're going to have in Southern Africa. Some consider his words prophetic, but I obviously think he was just analytical. He was smart enough to see the trend going, that African governments are going to fail. He saw it exactly as it is, that African governments, these black governments that are going to take over from the colonial powers, are going to fail to develop the continent of Africa, which will end up creating a crisis whereby people cannot be able to have jobs. People have no job opportunities. He saw it then that there was a backlog of development. Even those countries that were liberated, that were independent countries, were not developing. They were not in any shape or form in a trajectory to develop so that they can create employment for their own people. At least the population is skyrocketing. This is a judgment on our leaders. And today, 50 years later, exactly what he said, exactly what he saw. This is what's happening in Africa. These governments which took over from the colonial powers have completely failed to develop Africa, failed to transform Africa into becoming a productive continent, becoming productive countries, so that they can produce opportunities for their young people. Now, young people have no choice than to move to other countries to sort opportunity. And obviously, in the case of South Africa, because they did not chase the white people, then the economy is still functioning. I would imagine if they had chased the white people from the start, the same was going to happen. I do not understand, and I do not know what is wrong with us as black people. You know, you would understand that when you are taking these cadres, these veterans who were fighting in the war, and put them in positions of power to run an economy, Obviously, they do not have the knowledge and the skills and the capacity to be able to do that. But over time, you would expect them to try and put effort to learn on how to govern and on how to run economies. But unfortunately, they did not do that. They came into power and sat and started enjoying, and they got drunk on power. They focused on maintaining their grip on power and being in power rather than actually developing and running prosperous economies. And after decades in office, all they have now is excuses of why they didn't manage to develop the continent, why this did not happen because of sanctions and all that, but nothing. It's only politics, how the economies are being run, which has failed. They have failed to develop Africa. They have failed to run prosperous countries. That is the honest truth. All other excuses that they have, it's all nonsense, it's all bullshit. They have failed. That's why we have the situation that we have today. That's why we have the immigration crisis that we have today in South Africa. And as a people, we all trying to wrap our heads around how do we fix this immigration crisis. And exactly, if you want to fix it, fix what is broken. What is broken is the politics of these African countries, the governing of these African countries. If you do not fix that, nothing will ever change. Yes, South Africa can push back and close its borders. Yes, that is good for them. But still, the crisis will remain in those countries. The action that needs to be taken in those countries is to remove or straighten out and sort out those corrupt regimes. These people have become rogue. They have become criminals. Instead of taking responsibility and accountability for the wrongdoing that they have done and the ruin that they have caused to Africa, that's why they don't want any kind of opposition, anyone to say anything to them. They try to silence the people. That's all they are good for self-defense